In 1986, three teenage boys were throwing chunks of concrete off a highway bridge. One of those chunks smashed through the windshield of a car carrying a college student and her friend. The boys rushed down to the scene and found the girls miraculously unharmed. Pretending to help, they offered to drive them to a nearby payphone. But their true intentions were far more sinister. While they did take the girls to a phone, they never brought them back to their car like they had promised. Instead, two of the boys drove them to a remote field while the third left the scene. There, the remaining two subjected the girls to hours of unthinkable torture and assault. At one point, one of the attackers carelessly said the other's name in front of the victims. That slip-up sealed their fate. Knowing the girls could now identify them, the boys made a brutal decision and ended their lives. 21-year-old Wendy Afredo and 20-year-old Dawn McCreary tragically lost their lives that night. Thankfully, all three boys were caught shortly after. Richard Cooey was sentenced to death. However, Clinton Dickens received only a life sentence, as he was still 6 months away from being considered a legal adult. The third man, Kenneth Horonetz Jr., was released on parole after just 1 year, because he had left the scene early. Despite later arguing that his obesity made execution inhumane, Richard Cooey was executed by lethal injection in 2008.
Our history may not be exactly what they tell us. Did you know that all of the major cities in the United States had catastrophic fires in the 1800s and early 1900s that may not seem like much until you realize before the fires, this is what the cities looked like. We're told these magnificent buildings were just wood and plaster and thrown together in a couple of years for world fairs. But look at how massive these buildings were. This is Buffalo, New York, and we're supposed to believe this was built with horse and buggy and was just a temporary building? Does this look temporary to you? Something is not adding up. San Francisco also had a real treasure island, and this was Chicago, the White City. This is what's left of it. All destroyed in mysterious fires or controlled demolition. If you knew what we were taught in school wasn't exactly accurate, you might have some questions, like I do. Like, what could they possibly be covering up by burning these beautiful buildings to the ground? Maybe that giants once existed, maybe that energy is actually free and can be harvested from the ether, or maybe creatures we are told are mythological actually existed and still do. Maybe that our maps are wrong and the stories that we read about in the Bible actually took place here. But I don't know. Let me know what you think.
She ended her 5-year-old brother's life and then ate his privates. 5-year-old Macon Roque lived with his 18-year-old sister Karina and mother Daniela in Brazil. On April 4th of 2019, Daniela needed to leave the home to go do some shopping, so she left Macon at home with Karina. About an hour later, Daniela arrived home, and for some reason, she wasn't able to get the front door open. So at this point, she is yelling for Karina or Macon to come help open the door for her, but Karina yells back that she is not going to open it for her. Daniela started to get worried, so she ended up calling her brother-in-law who lived nearby to help break down the door. Once they were able to get the door to open, they went inside and they were met with a horrific scene. Karina had ended Macon's life, partially decapitated and mutilated him. The family dog started to attack Karina, but she retaliated and bit the dog. Karina then started to attack her uncle by throwing things at him and hitting him. She even tried to flee the scene, but she was caught. Once police arrived to the home to investigate Macon's body, they saw that his body was surrounded by black candles. Police truly believe that Karina was using Macon's body as part of a ritual. They even discovered that Karina had cut and eaten some of Macon's body parts. Karina was quickly arrested and taken into custody, and at first Karina was refusing to speak, but later on she confessed to everything. She stated that earlier that day she asked Macon if he wanted to come into her room to play some games, and of course he said yes. Karina then grabbed a pillow, pinned him down, and suffocated him. She then grabbed a knife and tried to remove his head, but she was unsuccessful, so she left him partially decapitated. Karina then inserted the knife into his eyes and burned his feet with a lighter. She then removed his privates and ate them. Karina was charged with aggravated homicide, attempted murder of her uncle, hiding the deceased body, and biting the family dog. She was sent to a psychiatric hospital and she continues to receive medical, social, and psychological care.
Have you heard about the guy in the middle of Nebraska who hasn't had contact with the outside world for over 7 years? Because as you can see, he uniformly surrounded his house with trees, and they won't even send the mail carrier in there anymore. The last one who went, a guy named Jessup's Buckleworth, got in there to deliver some packages from Amazon, and he never came out. And they say the odds are he's still trying to navigate through the trees. It might look super simple, but they said when you get in there, it's super hard, and there's like Vietnamese traps in there, and so it's something that you don't want to mess with. The authorities won't even go in there because they want to do a welfare check, and they're just like, it's not worth it. So now there's a petition to burn down all the trees and then use a megaphone to call to the guy to see if he's still there and he's still doing okay. But I'm curious, if you were the governance or authority, what would you choose to do to make contact?
They made empanadas out of women. In Brazil, Jorge Negromonte lived with his wife Isabel and his mistress Bruna. From the outside world, they seemed like an odd but harmless trio. They were polite, friendly, and struggling to make ends meet. But no one really knew what was going on inside of their home. Inside of that home, they were cleansing the world by getting rid of the women they considered to be impure. This trio would target young women, specifically ones that were struggling financially. They would put out a job application searching for a nanny with decent pay in a stable home. Once these women would get the job, they would think that they finally found a decent job, but they had no idea that they were walking into a death trap. Once these women would make it inside of the home, this trio would waste no time. The woman would be attacked, restrained, and brutally unalived. The most horrifying part was that the woman's flesh would be carved out and used as food. The trio believed that consuming the victims was part of a twisted purification ritual, even forced their own daughter to take part in eating these meals. The meat of these women were used to make empanadas, and they were sold to neighbors, including children. For years, they got away with it, and it seemed like they were never going to get caught. But in 2012, one of the victims, named Jessica, had family members that weren't going to let her disappearance go unnoticed. Her family was pushing for answers, and police were able to trace Jessica's last known location, and that was Jorge's house. Once police arrived to the home, they went to the backyard, and that's when they found Jessica and other women buried. Inside of the home, they found journals that detailed everything that had happened. In 2014, the trio was convicted. Jorge got a sentence of 24 years, but it got bumped up to 71 years as more evidence came out. As for Isabel and Bruna, they got similar sentences. Sadly, these victims never got to fight back, and their families never got to say goodbye.
They locked their mentally disabled daughter in a feces-covered cage. Melanie Granados was a 13-year-old girl with severe developmental disabilities that caused her to have the mental capacity of a 3-year-old child. Melanie's mom, Hami Hodges, and Melanie's grandmother, Virginia Lujan, locked Melanie in a makeshift cage for extended periods of time to control her. The cage was made from a bunk bed frame, baby gates, and zip ties. The cage was completely filled with human feces. Melanie's mother admitted that she stopped checking on her daughter because it was just easier not to. Melanie's grandmother, Virginia, called 911 because Melanie had stopped breathing. Virginia said that Melanie had fallen down the stairs 2 days ago, and they never called for medical help because they just assumed Melanie would be fine. Melanie was in fact not fine, and she passed away. Although it is listed that Melanie passed away from a head injury, the medical examiner ruled it a homicide with evidence of extreme physical abuse and severe medical neglect. There were so many times that Child Services went to Melanie's house and reported the disgusting living conditions. They also reported that Melanie had not been to school, the doctor, or the dentist in 2 years. Child Services reported it, but they didn't do anything about it. They just wrote it down. Virginia passed away due to natural causes while awaiting her trial. Hami has not been sentenced yet, and her trial has not concluded. Sick to my stomach doesn't even describe how I'm feeling right now. Child Services was at that house. Melanie could have been saved before any of this happened, but nothing was done. What do you guys think about this case?
A man won almost $1 million off a scratch-off ticket, and just weeks later, he vanished. It's been almost 10 months now, and Joshua Soto is still missing. Last spring, Joshua stopped at a convenience store and made a last-second decision to purchase a lottery ticket, and he won $1 million. He was very close to his family, so he decided to buy an RV and put it next to the family home so he could have his own space, but also be near them. According to his mother, Natalie, he started to express that he felt people were after him shortly before he disappeared. According to another family member, the night that he went missing, he was pacing and seemed concerned about something. He also hid his phone and all of his bank account information inside his mother's home. That very next morning on May 5th, his family realized he was gone. Not only that, but there was blood covering the whole floor of his RV. The family immediately called the police and reported it, but they say the RCMP didn't come to the RV or to their home until 2 days later. The police said they've done over 60 interviews, they've looked at all the evidence, and that they're not ruling out the fact that maybe Joshua just walked out and passed away from hypothermia. The family does not believe that's the case. Another theory is that he decided to disappear himself. However, his mother said he never would have left her like that, and the money he won has been untouched this entire time. The family believes something nefarious happened here, and I think it's important to also talk about his history. Another theory is this is connected to a double murder that happened in 2021. 2 people were brutally murdered, they were tortured, and they were rolled up into rugs to dispose of, and 5 people were charged for that murder. Those people include Joshua, his mother, and then other accomplices. Joshua ended up pleading guilty to accessory of the crime, and he was sentenced to 2 years. His mother also pled guilty as an accessory. So as of now, the RCMP says they will never close a missing persons case until they know where they are, but that their crimes unit is no longer working on this case, and they don't know what's happened to him. Based on their statements, it appears that they're not convinced that this was foul play, which I find questionable. At the end of the day, his family deserves to know what happened and to have closure, and I really hope they're able to get that. He is from Whitefish Lake First Nation in Alberta, Canada.
Okay, so I'm coming on here because something really weird just completely happened. So I was on that Palm Beach Pete. He's not Jeffrey, okay. His account right on Facebook, and I made a comment because he was like, I am not Jeffrey. I am not Jeffrey. He was like, something. I made the comment and I go, we know you are. We know you were hiding in Israel. And since the war went on, your ass was not staying there. And you got a hold of good old boy Donnie and said you're not going to hide out there anymore because there are strikes coming your way and bombs are flying. So you made your way back because there's no freaking way nobody noticed this man in Florida. There's just no way all these years. And then all of a sudden you come out, right? And I was like, and I put that on there. And I was like, now you want to play this like facade that you are that you're Palm Beach Pete, that you are Pete. Okay, he's posting pictures from the 90s or the 80s of him when he was younger. You really look like him there, because then you posted a look-alike, or then you posted like Jeffrey's actual photos from the 90s. You look just like him. You're not fooling anybody. And I told them that on the comment, right? So all of a sudden, my Facebook is closed down. I have no Facebook. I appealed it. They're saying, like, I'm not me. I've had my Facebook for over 5 years. I mean, like, that's so wild to me that I made this comment. And now my whole Facebook's completely shut down. There is no getting it back. I'm very upset because I had a bunch of pictures on there. But how ironic I make that comment. That we know that you were hiding in Israel, and we know that your girl Ghislaine, or whatever her name is in Canada, and they don't want you in Canada. They were willing to take her, but not you. I said all of that in this comment, and then my whole Facebook collapsed, shut down, done. There's no fixing it. Tell me it ain't weird. Tell me it's not weird.
On grainy CCTV footage, they could just about make out 2 figures entering the garage, but only one ever came back out. What happened to her was a mystery until they noticed a buzzard kept circling the same patch of grass. It was summer 2015 in Graham in Texas. Leah Martin was a friendly young mum of a little daughter called Avery. She was incredibly hardworking. She was only 22, but she really wanted to do her best to provide for her daughter. She'd recently done like a phlebotomy course, which is basically like where you learn to take people's blood. And she also worked as a receptionist at a car garage. Her baby daddy was this guy called Aaron Blair, and they were very on and off. Now, at this time they were technically off, but it wouldn't be unusual for her to like stay over at his house. I think the lines were blurred slightly, and I do get it because she really couldn't get away with him. Not only did they share a daughter together, but Aaron's dad, E.C. Blair, was her boss. He was the owner of the car garage. And if you think that sounds messy, just wait. It was the end of May and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. It was just a bog standard Friday afternoon. Leah lived with her dad at this point, and she texted him just to say that she was planning to drop her daughter off with Aaron and then go and grab some stuff from work. I believe she had like a change of clothes there or something. But hours and hours ticked by and she just never came home. So initially the dad's thinking, well, do you know what? Maybe she just ended up staying with Aaron the night. That wasn't unusual. But when she wasn't even back in the morning, he started frantically pacing round, getting really concerned. He was like, maybe I am being an overprotective dad, but I just want to check with Aaron that she's definitely stayed over there. And when he asked Aaron, he said no. He said, she just dropped off our daughter last night to go and run some errands and I haven't heard from her since. And police checked everything out and Aaron had a solid alibi. They knew that he definitely wasn't involved in her disappearance. So they then headed over to Leah's work, the last known place that she was heading. But when they showed up at her workplace, they noticed something really chilling. Leah's car was there and her bag, but she was nowhere to be seen. So the next step is check the CCTV, right? Will somebody please tell me why the CCTV for Leah's workplace mysteriously stopped working the exact day before she vanished? Seems suspicious, right? They did in fact have very grainy CCTV from a business across the road. They could just about make out that night somebody driving to the workplace, getting out of the vehicle and entering the garage. And then shortly after, another vehicle arrived, got out of the car and into the garage. But only one figure ever came back out. They couldn't exactly make out the people in the CCTV, but they had a strong suspicion one person was Leah. Then they searched her computer and they were about to find something that absolutely blew this case apart. Because Leah had been seeing somebody in secret behind everybody's back, a married man, and not any married man, her daughter's granddad, her baby daddy's dad, the owner of the company E.C. Blair. Now this could mean so many motives for so many people, specifically E.C.'s wife, Lisa. She admitted to police that she had found out about this affair right before Leah vanished. And also, Leah's dad told police she'd been getting threatening calls off a female. So they needed to really figure out who was in that CCTV footage. They couldn't quite make out the figures, but they probably had a good idea of whose car it was. The car seemed to match the employee Ross Helms. And when police questioned him, he just seemed very dodgy. His story didn't seem to add up. He told police that he was out drinking at a bar that night with a friend, but when they asked the friend, he couldn't corroborate the story and said, no, I wasn't even with him. And remember those threatening phone calls? Well, turned out Ross's relative came forward to police to say, yeah, that was me. Ross just paid me to make those calls. The night Leah vanished, Ross also seemed to be mysteriously calling another colleague many times. This was Billy Minkley, like an unusual amount of phone calls. So a random family member of Ross heard about all of this commotion about the missing girl and they were like, this doesn't feel right to me. I'm going to go to Ross's house and just check it out. And she truly was doing the Lord's work. She was rooting around the bins outside and told police, I smell a very strong smell of decomposition. Not only that, but in the back garden was a buzzard sat in a tree staring at this one particular patch of grass. That bird clearly knew something everybody else didn't know. Police were called, they dug up the land, and there she was, Leah. Lay there covered in a blanket with a plastic bag over her head. Horrifically, she had a rock in her mouth, which was to stop her being able to bite through the plastic bag, which was just absolutely horrific and callous to think about. Certainly makes me feel like her killer knew what they were doing and they'd potentially done this before. Cue Billy Minkley. being arrested for another murder, this time a triple homicide. Now, Billy Minkley was facing the death penalty for this other triple murder, and he was finally like, fine, I will tell you guys what you want to know about Leah if you take the death penalty off the table. And so they did. He admitted E.C. Blair was the one to orchestrate this whole thing. He'd lured Leah to the office on the night of her murder and struck her over the head with a crowbar. He'd got his 2 employees to help him because he said Leah was causing issues in his marriage. How about you're causing issues in your own marriage by cheating? Ross and Billy were the ones that put the bag over her head and helped bury her. They both pleaded guilty, but EC managed to somehow worm his way out of this and was acquitted. It honestly begs belief. The 2 hitmen are serving life sentences, and EC just got to walk free. Although his car garage business did thankfully close down.
I don't know why, to be honest with you, this isn't talked about more. Rosalind McGinnis lived in Oklahoma with her mom, her stepdad, and her brothers. And Rosalind McGinnis was only 12 years old and in the 6th grade when she walked out of her middle school for the very last time. Growing up, she was always a very happy child. She loved animals, loved music, loved hanging out with friends and meeting new people. Overall, such a wonderful little girl to have around. Yet, things for her changed when she was around 9 years old when her mom met a man called Henry Piet. Henry Piet would be the man that would become Rosalind's stepfather, and Henry was a terrible, terrible man. When they met, Henry also had children of his own, so they kind of bonded over that. They had a lot in common as far as the stage of life they were in. So Rosalind's mother and Henry begin dating. It gets serious. They end up merging their families, leaving Rosalind not only with a new stepfather, but also with step-siblings. And Henry's red flags started showing immediately. He entered Rosalind's life when she was only 9 years old, and only 3 years later, she would disappear. He wasn't a good guy in any capacity, and when they all started living together, he very quickly became demanding, controlling, and very, very angry. And it wasn't long before his anger turned physical, and he would take out his anger on both Rosalind and her mother. And it was bad to the point that people around them would constantly notice them having injuries or bruises all over their bodies. There are conflicting reports as far as how he treated his own children. Some reports state that he was also awful to them, but some say that he wasn't. Whatever the case is, at the end of the day, they were also children, and the environment that Henry was creating was extremely toxic and violent, which no kid should be in. There are also kind of a little bit of conflicting reports when it comes to Rosalind's mother. If you are familiar with this case and know it through and through, please feel free to comment if I missed anything, but she was also absolutely a victim of Henry herself. However, in later interviews, Rosalind speaking now as an adult, she has said that her mother knew that Henry had essayed Rosalind and that she didn't care. She once also did not believe Rosalind when she was little, and she went to her and told her that one of Henry's sons had essayed her. Her mom didn't believe her. So to be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure what that dynamic was like. Although later on we do see that Rosalind's mother did try to escape to get away from Henry and tried to take the kids with her. So I don't know exactly what to make of that, but just thought I should mention it. But because Henry had such a bad temper and he was so noticeably evil, people around them began to notice the way that he was treating Rosalind and her mother. And concerns about their safety were raised very quickly. So what did he do? Well, he just packed up his family and he moved them to a different city without any plan at all. So they were kind of in limbo for a little while, just trying to get money to settle into a new house until they did eventually move into a house in Wagner, Oklahoma. And there, Henry only got worse. The punishments that he would carry out were not only physical, but now also psychological. He was horrible in every sense of the world. There was one time in which Gayla, that's Rosalind's mother, managed to escape Henry. She took all of the children, she fled to Missouri, but he quickly found them and he dragged them all back to Oklahoma. And as you can imagine, for attempting to escape, things only got worse. On a different occasion, CPS stepped in to separate them, sending Gayla, Rosalind, and the children to go stay at a shelter to get them away from Henry. Yet even after that, Henry managed to find a way to get them back because that's what he always did, because he had such a strong need for control. He craved control. When Rosalind was 11 years old, Henry had his 15-year-old son perform a marriage ceremony between him and Rosalind. Obviously, it wasn't a real marriage ceremony. It was held in the back of a van, but his son acted as both the priest and the witness, and yeah, he married them. If that gives you an idea of how sick and twisted Henry's mind was. January 31st of 1997 was a Friday. According to reports, Rosalind's mother, by that point, had had enough. Enough was enough. She had officially left Henry after less than a year of marriage, and she had moved into a women's shelter for victims along with the children. But that day, while Rosalind was in school, Henry showed up. He called her over and told her that he was going to be reuniting their family, and he told her to go back into the school and to wait for a sign. That afternoon, Henry sent his son, who was around 18 years old at the time, to pick up Rosalind from school in a small gray pickup truck. Rosalind obviously knew who he was, so she got in the car willingly, and the son then drove her to a hotel room in Tulsa, about 2 hours away. At first, Rosalind was told that her mom was on the way and that she was going to be joining them. But once they got out of town, once they met up with Henry, Henry then told Rosalind that that was not going to happen. He told her that her mother didn't want her and that she was now going to be considered a runaway. He also told her that she would be in very serious trouble if she ever did try to leave and go back home to be with her mother. And then he turned to his own children and informed them that 12-year-old Rosalind was now their new mother. Meanwhile, back at the shelter, Gayla has realized that her daughter is missing. As soon as Rosalind failed to show up from school at the time in which she would have already been back, Gayla called the police to report that her daughter had been kidnapped. She knew that it was Henry, or at the very least, she had a very strong gut feeling because she knew what he was like and she knew that he was the type of person to kidnap a little girl. Gayla was going to try and do whatever she could to find her daughter. She would print out posters with her name and her face on them. She would talk about it as often as she could to make sure that people were aware. She would work with authorities and also then turn to the internet to spread awareness, begging and pleading for her daughter's safe return home. But for her and for authorities, it felt like Henry and Rosalind had completely disappeared off the face of the earth. And after about a year, the search slowed down. Rosalind would be held against her will for the next 19 years, and throughout that time, not by choice, she would give birth to 9 babies, all fathered by Henry. It was more than clear that Henry wanted complete and absolute control over Rosalind, and he wanted to treat her as if she was his wife and ultimately as the mother of his children, all for his own sick pleasure. At only 12 years old, Rosalind's days were filled with absolute torment. In the first few days, Henry put Rosalind in a van in which they would be living out of for about a year. They traveled throughout different cities and states in the United States, staying in hotels, ranches, and trailer parks until they eventually decided to cross the border into Mexico in the year 2000. I said they didn't decide. It was all Henry's decisions. He was the only one making decisions. But in Mexico, they found practically an abandoned, empty building with a rotted out floor, no electricity, no water, no anything, and that's where they stayed. Rosalind would beg on the streets for food and money just to have enough to barely survive, because any money that they did have, Henry would use on buying substances. And I guess Henry's tactic to staying under the radar included 3 things. He first changed his own name and Rosalind's name very often, not legally obviously, but he would just start calling her and calling himself different names in an attempt to stay hidden. He also managed to get a hold of different vehicles so they would stay undetected. Henry also wanted authorities to actually truly believe that Rosalind was a runaway and that she had left on her own accord. So every so often, he would drive her back to Oklahoma in his van to have her write letters to mail to her mom, pretending that she had left on her own and that she was doing okay. He drove back to Oklahoma to mail the letters out from there to try and make them believe that she was still in the state. Henry also then forced Rosalind to dye her hair black and to wear glasses to make her unrecognizable. 12-year-old Rosalind McGinnis experienced SA from her stepfather every single day for years. She was not even 13 years old when she fell pregnant for the first time. She lost that baby, but it was still an extremely traumatic situation for her, given that she was a baby herself. This is a quote from her, quote, "I was scared and I was so confused and I didn't know what was happening. Looking back on what happened to me, I don't even know how any human can do that to a child, what he did to me." At 14 years old, she fell pregnant again, and she was only 15 years old when she gave birth for the very first time. Henry delivered the baby himself in the back of the van after he had taken Rosalind to the hospital and had been told that it was way too early to deliver the baby because they were not ready yet. But like I said, he had such a strong need for control that he wanted the baby out, so he took the baby out. And just the thought of the pain that Rosalind would have been in that traumatizing experience, it is truly incomprehensible. But the SA wasn't the only kind of was put through. Henry still had the same sick and twisted and violent mind that he had always had, and daily he would find a way to punish Rosalind for anything. Rosalind had scars, still has scars all over her head, from her head to her toes, from what he put her through. A lot of those scars being from glass bottles, wood pieces, baseball bats, or cast iron skillets. In the beginning, Rosalind has said that she tried to escape multiple times, that all she wanted to do was run away and cry, but she was not successful, and then she would be punished even worse for it. It got to a point in which Rosalind felt like she had no more to give. To be able to cope, she had to disassociate to protect her mind, and she kind of just became numb until all of the things that were being done to her, everything that was happening to her, stopped registering, because this was her new normal. Quote, "When I was caught, the consequences were great. Eventually, at one point in time, it didn't affect me anymore because I was so used to it," unquote. Fighting back took all of her energy and she was running out of it. By 2016, 19 years after she had been kidnapped and 9 births later, Rosalind and Henry had landed in Oaxaca in southern Mexico. It was there that Rosalind, who was going by the fake name of Stephanie at the time, met Lisa and Ian at a local supermarket. They were an older married couple who would ultimately be the ones to finally help her escape. One day in early 2016, Rosalind took her children to stock up on groceries at the Oaxaca supermarket. When she went to go check out, she realized that she did not have enough money. Lisa and Ian just so happened to be behind her, and they just so happened to speak English, luckily. They offered to help Lisa pay for her groceries, and then they struck up a conversation. From that very first time meeting, something immediately felt off to Lisa and Ian. Lisa has said, quote, "We were in line and they were in front of us. They had 2 giant cars of groceries. One was entirely filled with meat, which the children told us later was only for him," referring to Henry. "And they couldn't pay the bill. They were short on money, so Ian and I just gave them money and she was grateful," end quote. After that day, Lisa and Ian decided to stay in contact with Rosalind, and they would continue seeing each other at the supermarket every once in a while. And almost every single time, all of the kids were barefoot. Little things like that were so extremely concerning to Lisa. In regards to the kids, she has said, quote, "They were just desperate to talk, not the very youngest ones because they wouldn't say anything until they got to know us, but they just wanted anyone to talk to because it wasn't something that they were allowed to do," end quote. Eventually, things got to the point in which Lisa and Ian befriended not only Rosalind and the kids, but also Henry. I think they were playing it smart. I think they knew that something was off and they were being nice because they genuinely wanted to be nice and friendly towards Rosalind, but also in order to gain trust. And one day, they went over to Rosalind and Henry's house and they were absolutely shocked to see the conditions they were living in. The children's sleeping arrangements were absolutely concerning. Quote, "There were 3 stalls, for lack of a better word, all in line with a raw cement floor, and they had holes in the walls for doors and windows, but no doors and windows," end quote. But it was when Henry slipped up that everything changed. Because during a visit, Henry accidentally said that he was 62 years old. Lisa, who knew that Rosalind was 32 years old at the time and had a teenage son, started doing the math. If she was 32 years old, then she had a teenage son. That meant that she had a baby when she was a teenager herself, and this man was 62 years old. Something was very, very wrong. As soon as she could be sure that Henry wasn't listening, Lisa went up to Rosalind and she said, "What's going on? I know something is going on. Please let me help you." Together, they then started talking about how she would ultimately escape. A few weeks later, when Henry was passed out, Rosalind took the only opportunity that she knew that she would have, very quietly packed up the things that she had, and with cash that she had been saving up, she called a taxi to take them to Lisa and Ian's home, and she fled with 8 of 9 of her children. Her oldest child had managed to escape because of Henry. He couldn't take it anymore and he just escaped, but they would be reunited later. They made it safely to their house, and after a few days, Rosalind finally told Lisa everything. She told her her real name. She told her that Henry was not her husband, but instead her stepfather, that all of her kids were his, and that he had kidnapped her 19 years ago. Lisa looked up Rosalind's real name, and the first thing that came up was the missing persons poster. And Rosalind broke down and she started crying and telling Lisa that she had waited almost 2 decades for somebody to find her, to notice her, and help her. In July of 2016, Rosalind McGinnis walked into a U.S. consulate with 8 of her children, told them everything, and finally, after 19 years, she began the process of returning home. Her oldest son was reunited with her shortly after, and they were finally safe. As they started working to make their way back to the United States to start the very difficult process of rebuilding their lives from the ground up, the FBI launched a full investigation into Henry Piet's whereabouts. He managed to be on the run for over a year until September 2017 when he made a critical mistake. Guy wasn't very smart and attempted to obtain a U.S. passport at the American Embassy in Mexico City. He was arrested on the spot, and on February 25th of 2020, nearly 24 years after the kidnapping, Henry Piet was sentenced to life in prison. He denied everything, by the way, saying that he didn't do anything wrong because Rosalind was his wife, and all he was doing was spending time with his wife. He was saying that he was deeply in love with her and stuff. Weird. As far as Rosalind's mom, all I could find was that Rosalind was eventually reunited with her mother, but there's nothing specifically mentioning her mom and their reunion. But there are a lot of interviews that Rosalind has since then done, and she says that obviously she's traumatized from everything that she went through. It takes years to heal from something like that, or to even try to begin healing. But she has spoken out and said that they are now focused on replacing all of the bad memories with good memories. Yeah. Strong woman. That is all I have for today. Thank you guys for spending time with me today and for listening to Rosalind's story. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
I'm posting this video for my family's protection. I'm posting this video for documentation purposes only because Disney Cruise Line is not doing anything about the situation that's happening on board. We're currently being confined to our room, and I want to talk to you guys about what's going on, but I also want to get the word out. So what I need from you, there's 42,000 people who follow me. What I need from you is to like, share, and comment. If you have negative things to say about the situation, I am going to be silencing you, so don't even waste your breath. I need the word to get out before we hit shore. I've also reached out to my people, and they are documenting everything for me, but I do want to get the word out about what's going on because something just doesn't feel right in my mama bones, and I need to talk about it. 2 days ago, my daughter was at the Oceaneers Club on the Disney Wonder. We were in Maui, and my husband and I were out on an excursion, and she was at the Oceaneers Club while her godmom was on board, and her brother was at the nursery. So there was full-on care for her. Around 9 a.m., my friend, her godmom, gets a message, and the message says that she would like to be picked up. Godmom picks her up, feeds her, takes care of her, takes her for the rest of the day until my husband and I get back from our excursion. We get back on the ship. At that time, our daughter had shared with us that she fell at the kids club. We asked her, how is she feeling? Where did she fall? She pointed to her, the side of her face, and she said that she fell off of something. So we looked at it, we asked her if she wanted any medicine, and we did everything that we could to make her feel comfortable at that time, okay? We all go to sleep that night, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, our daughter is screaming in agony. She's screaming in pain, and she tells my husband that she wants to go see the doctor. Now, my family and I, anytime our children, each other, anytime we're not feeling well, immediately we go to medical. We do not neglect our kids. We don't care how much it costs. We go. And so at 2 o'clock in the morning, he races down to medical. I get the baby back to sleep because he woke up, and I tell their godmom, like, hey, I'm gonna leave too. Can you watch over him while I go down to medical? So we're all down in medical, and the doctor assesses my daughter. And before the doctor assesses my daughter, the doctor says, or the nurse says, what happened? And we tell him she had a fall in kids club, and she, she's not feeling well. I also mentioned to him that the fall wasn't reported to us, so we didn't get any information from the kids club team. We didn't get a message. We didn't get anything about a head injury that happened. And so we don't really know what happened. It's just based off of what she's telling us. So the doctor comes in because she was on call. She woke up, she comes in, and she assesses my daughter. They take her temperature. She has a slight fever, but it's not too high. My kids just run hot, especially at night. They have a lot of stuff going on. They're just hot. And she says, okay, well, I think this is like a viral thing, and I'm going to give you antibiotics and Motrin and Tylenol. And I was like, well, you don't need to give us Motrin and Tylenol. We already have that back in the cabin. We're good to go. So we take the antibiotics. She gives us syringes. We get back to the room. But before I give my daughter that medication, I go to guest services and I say, hey, this incident happened. My daughter fell at the kids club. We didn't get any information on it. Now she's crying in pain. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. And I want to talk to somebody who works in kids club about this incident. And here's where the story gets absolutely insane. So the next morning around 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, phone starts ringing in our room, in our stateroom. And it's medical saying, we need you guys to come down here as soon as possible. So we can't move as soon as possible. We have 2 toddlers, and, we're not going to put our daughter back into the Oceaneers Club at this point because we don't know what happened. And the nursery is separate. So we're like, okay, like maybe we can send our son, but we're just like slowly waking up. So we finally go down there around like 8 o'clock or so. And the medical team sits us down and they give us a diagnosis for our daughter. A clinical diagnosis for our daughter that doesn't have to do with any viral infection. It doesn't have to do with anything that requires antibiotics, but it has everything to do with being in isolation for a long period of time. And so I was like, well, how did you guys determine that? Because you didn't take any swabs. Like, you guys just determined that we need to be in isolation. And the first thing they start saying is, you guys can exit the ship and fly home. And I'm like, what? You guys don't even want to know how much I pay for this trip. Outside of like our room, where concierge, the outfits, everything, the flights, everything. You all of a sudden are saying that we need to get off the ship and go stay at a hotel and then leave when possible, right? Like, this just wasn't adding up to me, right? And so after they tell us that, I say, wait a minute, slow down, slow all the way down. I said, last night the diagnosis was something that required antibiotics, and we were going to start giving her antibiotics right away. you don't want to just give your child antibiotics, right? Like I've given my children antibiotics. I'm not against that, but you don't just want to give it to them if they don't need it. And two, what you are diagnosing her with doesn't require antibiotics. So at what point did the condition change to something that requires 5 days of isolation or us getting off of the ship? And so now my spidey senses are up 100%. And I call my mom and I call my people back home and I start documenting like all these notes in my phone of like timelines of things that happened, the first diagnosis, the second diagnosis when they're asking us to leave, and them not addressing what happened in the kids club at all. Let me pause here. It has been about 48 hours since this incident happened in the kids club. Yeah, it's been 2 days. We have not received any information, no follow-up, no closing the loop, right? I work in human resources and I'm in law school right now. No closing the loop, right? Like we are left wide open. Yesterday, we had a conversation with 2 doctors on board, our doctors, and everyone is giving us different information. They want to check our immunization records, but our immunization records don't even mean anything, even though everyone in our family is fully vaccinated against everything. They don't mean anything. So why do you want to check our records, right? And they're pushing us to leave. All of a sudden, oh yes, your insurance will cover everything for the hotel, for any incidents that happen off the ship. Anything that you guys have booked, we'll go ahead and cancel it and cover it for you. They're really pushing us to get off of the ship without closing the loop on what happened to my daughter in the kids club. And now all of a sudden at 8 o'clock in the morning, she has a brand new diagnosis that requires us to leave or to isolate. We look at flights, and something that my husband and I had determined a long time ago when we first got together is we don't split the group. We looked at flights because we were on, at this point we're at the Big Island, and flights from the Big Island to where we live in San Diego, we're running 10,000 around, I think he said 10,000, I don't even know. But we could only get 2 plane tickets. Even if Godmom stayed back and flew on her own, because she's a grown woman, we couldn't fly with myself and my infant. So it'd be my husband and my daughter, or me and my daughter, most likely my husband and my daughter, because I'm still nursing my son. We would split the group. We'd spend all this money up front. We'd completely miss our vacation, and we would never get answers about what happened at kids club. So this is what happened. My mom is currently tracking everything. She's the best investigator I've ever heard of in my life. She knows that she knows that we're on our way from Hawaii to Vancouver, and we'll be there in 4 days. We are isolated to our room. There has been no follow-up to what happened, but we ended up staying on the ship because we didn't want to split the group. Everything feels a little sketchy. And so we ended up staying together as a family, and we are here. And this is why I'm making this video. This is a 10-minute video. My time is almost up. I might make a part 2. I'm pretty emotional, I'm pretty riled up. My husband and I have been through all the stages of grief. My husband is also in the Navy, 17 years. Being isolated to a hotel or on a ship is probably not the best for him at this point. So that's where we're at.